Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from beautiful Villa Vrindavan, Tuscany, Italia. This is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your kind of like sidekick host today, Kaustubha Das. And hopefully we'll be able to get Raghunath in. He's in Florence right now, kind of like on the road. We tried to bring him in and we were having a little trouble picking him up. But we also have a special guest with us today, which is Raghunath Prabhu, who many of you remember we brought him on over a year ago. At the time, Raghunath was serving as a hospital chaplain at New York Presbyterian Hospital, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that was at the height of the COVID, when New York was really the epicenter of it, and you were serving there, people that were families and people who were passing away from COVID, and now you're down in Florida, correct?
That's correct, and it's like the same scene again with here in Florida with a lot of COVID breakouts.
Florida's getting hit hard too.
Yeah.
Man, you just go where there's the need. You're always there. But so we, today's our Q&A day, and we're going to be checking in with Raghunath Prabhu. Please let me know if there's an echo from this, because they're saying it's still an echo. Let me know for sure if there's an echo, and I'll plug in my headphones if need be. But I just wanted to share a few announcements today. And this is a big one, that we plan to kick off by October this whole scheme. We don't really have a name for it yet, but this idea where we're going to create different reading or discussion groups from our listeners who want to practice bhakti more completely. You can join a group. There you'll have a chance to hear from the text, share your thoughts, ask your questions, make some friends, get a bit of mentorship. And then, so we'll have many different groups. There'll be different kinds of groups. You can join the kind of group that you most relate to, men's group, women's group, this group, that group. But we'll also be like surveying you all to get like the most pressing needs and most pressing issues that concern you in your practice. It may have to do with raising children. They may be psychological issues. There may be institutional issues. We'll talk about this more as we go, but if you may remember, we reached out and we spoke about that before. We really are looking forward to getting this started. We're going to try to start it at the beginning of October. About over 60 people wrote in and said that they would like to be part of a group. If you've written in, we've sent you an email now, filling you in a little bit more on it, and also asking you to fill out a survey. We ask you to fill out those surveys as quickly as possible. Our plan is to cap this at 100 people, and then kind of like use it as the beta version, just kind of like the test version from October through the end of December. And then probably at the end of this December, we'll work out whatever kinks are there, and then we'll open it up to more people going into next year. But if you'd like to be a part of this, if you'd like to join one of these groups, get together for weekly Sangha online, and be part of this whole really kind of dynamic idea to really support one another. I haven't mentioned now, but Raghunath is part of a team that is like a team of professional counselors in different areas. Raghunath we'll talk about what he does more today, but a lot of it has to do with end of life care. And as a hospital chaplain, there are people that are expert in relationship counseling, addiction counseling, so many different things. And so these are professionals, but they're all Krishna Bhaktas. They're all Bhakti yogis, and they'll be working to kind of provide resources and support on all different levels. So I think it'll be a really great thing. If you're interested, as I say again, we're going to cap it at 100, and already over 60 have written in. So now would be a good time to write in. You write to wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, and you just write reading groups, and then we'll know that what it's about, and we'll get back to you with the survey. Anyway, that's something exciting, and we'll be bringing more about that to you soon. I also need to mention that there will be no show tomorrow. Things are just getting too wild here, and it's too hard to put together. So sorry about that. No show tomorrow or Monday. We'll be back on Tuesday, where Raghunath will be in Switzerland, I think, and I will be in Assisi. And so we look forward to that. Anything else, Mara, that we need to discuss right now?
I don't think so. There'll be a Bhakti recovery group meeting today at 9:30 a.m. What time will the show be on Tuesday? Probably will we be back?
Oh, yeah. I would like to think that we could do it at the normal time, which would be 5 a.m. Eastern time. I don't see why not, but really we need to check in with Raghunath before we can confirm that. So let's plan on that, but we'll get back to you through the various channels of Patreon and so on to let you know about that if that changes. All right. Okay, Ganesham, are you ready to get started? I got a question
Yes,
for you today. This question was it's a very sincere question. It's kind of question. When I look at a question like this, I say I got to go get Ganesham because he's going to be so much better prepared to handle this. But this is from a friend of ours, but it's written in anonymously, coming from an anonymous Zoomer via email, and this is what they write. They write, "My father has been recently diagnosed with cancer at the age of 90. While at this point it is not considered terminal, there is always the possibility that this can become a slippery slope. He is very weak. My relationship over the years with both my parents has deteriorated to where I just try to make an effort to peacefully coexist. My childhood was filled with terror and violence in the home. I feel abandoned. The fallout has naturally traumatized me so badly that it affects me to this day. It limits me in times of confrontation because my fight or flight has been completely compromised. It's the gift that keeps on giving. My Krishna conscious mind has taught me to forgive and follow the 6 pillars." And so there he's speaking about Raghunath's 6 pillars, which are, not to take offense and to forgive quickly and so on and so forth. So he says his mind has been trained to think that way, but he says, however, I'm struggling because of all the anger inside towards them. I want to confront them, but I know it will end in a complete falling out. I don't want to spend the rest of my life with that burden on my consciousness or my conscience. Another possibility is to serve and say nothing, but their current living arrangement is no longer financially sustainable, nor are they physically capable of sustaining the upkeep. I've tried to intervene, but have been unsuccessful. I won't be burdened by their negligence. Should there not be a cutoff to my responsibility to serve them? Or lastly, I can just keep my distance or even walk away from them because of the toxicity in this family dynamic. Can you give me some advice, being mindful of how hurt I am with feelings of abandonment, fear, anger, and sadness? I know these are material world setbacks. I know Krishna is challenging me and asking if I really want to dance. The truth is, I do, but I just don't know how. I'm afraid that if I'm not all in, he will abandon me as well." Okay. Ganesham Prabhu, I know that you're a person that on the daily basis are dealing with all kind of circumstances like this, or that might be related to this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Wow, there's so much there in that really valuable question, I think, for all of us. And one thing I'm thinking is, forgiveness is not just a moral recommendation. It can be so powerful. It can be life-changing. There's In the Bhagavatam, Krishna says in one place, to tikshashmi, he says, I am forgiveness. It's a divine possibility to actually forgive completely from the heart. It is possible. And so this question is great because it's not just about, oh, my father is dying. But this could be for all of us especially in terms of our relationship with our parents. Because often we think, oh, well, my relationship was good. My parents tried the best they could and so forth. But if we look deep, we see that we often hold some resentment. And a conversation with our parents about that, even though it's a really difficult one, can be transforming. And it can open up your relationship with Krishna in a new way. So it's directly related, I think, to our spiritual life. Because what it really means to forgive a person doesn't mean to forgive their wrong, whatever they've done that's wrong. It means to let go of resentment that we're holding from our hearts. There's like a wall of resentment, of anger. And a lot of things go along with that too. It's not just, if you have anger, there's also fear. It affects our whole life. And imagine letting that go. How that opens the heart and allows for one to have an experience of Krishna, new experiences of Krishna. There's so much in that question, and I'm just speaking spontaneously right now, but I definitely have had many experiences of people where forgiveness becomes the main focus because a loved one is near the time of death. It's what comes up for people. There's a book that's written about this, 4 things that come up, especially for a person who's dying or a loved one who's dying. And one of them is forgiveness, the desire to forgive others and to be forgiven. So it's very common. This comes up at the end of life. So, but I would say for all of us, this conversation with our parents, I'll show a little bit what it could look like. But of course, all of our situations are unique. So we have to make it personal, but still, the first thing is to understand that forgiveness is not just forgiving the wrong that was done to us, but it really means letting go of resentment from our heart. So, for example, I approached both my parents at some point, having understood some of these things, and I reflected on my relationship with them. And I always thought, well, my mother's great. She's done everything for me. My father's been great, But the more I reflected on it, I realized, my parents were divorced when I was very young. And without knowing it at the time, I was kind of resenting my father for having left the home. So I kind of got in touch that actually that's how I feel. And I went to him at some point. This is not too long ago. And I told him, I've been reflecting on our relationship. I appreciate, everything. He was always there for me, At the same time, there was this divorce and it affected me. And so I just talked to him about that. And I said, I realized I've been resenting you. And I'm sorry for that. And immediately he just cried. He was like holding this guilt for so long and we had never talked about it. And I think an important thing about how to forgive when there's anger or resentment is to take a little time first to reflect that whatever's happened to us, just as we are kind of in a state, it's Krishna Bahir Mukha Hoy Bhoga Vansha Kare. There's this verse that we're turned away from God. And in that state, we make all kinds of mistakes and we get certain addictions and we hurt people, we damage other people. So forgiveness begins with self-knowledge, reflecting on that's true for me. Just as I've done it, it's also been done to me. And so forgiveness can kind of mean like seeing within oneself that I'm in this fallen state, and my parents too. They're not, unless they're perfect enlightened beings, they've made mistakes, and those have had consequences. Those have had reactions on their children. So it's a kind of, you go with a kind of understanding of that I've been harmed, perhaps, just like I harm others. I don't want to, but that happens. And so with a kind of understanding, you can approach your mother and father and say, it's not, you did so and so and it affected me. I realized you couldn't help it, just like I can't help it sometimes. I forgive you for that. And I've been holding resentment towards you. And I'm sorry for holding that resentment. I want to let it go. So this is really powerful. So with my father, it was, it was like our relationship changed up after that conversation, where he let go of so much, I let go of so much, and we became like friends, for the first time, deeper friends. And so a lot of us hold, if we look at our upbringing, that relationship with the parents is like shows up everywhere in life, right? It's a powerful relationship. Your parents are God for you when you're a child. And so how you're treated, what you've gone through really just lives throughout the rest of your life. But you can make a change and break from whatever's happened by this forgiveness, by approaching, going down face to face. And it's so scary. It's like, because we don't know how the reaction will be. Just like this in this question, this person is also at, but we're a little bit worried about the reaction of the parents by going and having this conversation. But I highly recommend doing it, whatever the reaction may be.
That's where I was going to ask you, because
Yeah, please jump in, Kaustubhaji, because I'm
yeah,
just talking.
no, I'm appreciating everything you're saying, but I kind of got from this question, it was like this was a particularly toxic circumstance that he's lived with his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like I could try to help them right now, but I think even if I try to help them, they're not going to respond well to it. And maybe that'll just make things worse. Now, another possibility is I just walk away from this. I mean, theoretically, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, can you walk away from it and forgive and maybe avoid some kind of conflict that might even be just like kind of like the final conflict that just kind of put the, just kind of stayed stuck with you for the rest of your life by even trying to help. But what I'm hearing from you now is saying, like, go into it no matter what the result will be. And maybe, yeah, so I'm very curious to hear, why you're suggesting that.
Yeah, I think it is possible because it's a spiritual thing. Like a parent may pass away, right?
Yeah.
So is there possible still to forgive? Yes, it is, because it's a spiritual thing, and it's the same process. When you reflect how all of us are in a state of a kind of illusion, right? Where we're harming each other's, we're either exploiting others or we're being exploited. When you're in material consciousness, those are the two choices. Either you cheat others or you get cheated. Either you exploit others or you get exploited. And both of them are under the illusory energy. And we kind of go back and forth in that. And so it is possible to forgive. But I would say if your parents are not, if they haven't passed away, if they're actually there, there's a real power in this face-to-face conversation, and you'll see how frightening it is. And for that very reason, it can transform, because you're going there and you're again, their reaction is not so important. Actually, what you're doing is you're going to let go of resentment from your own heart. Somebody may appreciate that. Somebody may not be ready for that conversation. Somebody may get angry at you. But if you do it in the right way, you're going to drop anger and resentment from your heart. Imagine how that's going to affect the rest of your life. you get courage back. You know, you get so many things that come back that you forgot that you actually had, that are more like qualities of the soul than of the conditioned self.
So it does seem from the question that our friend has been it's been weighing on them their whole life,
Mhm.
and you're saying this is an opportunity to kind of let go of it all.
Yeah.
But it almost sounds like they're going into maybe the most difficult conversation of their life. Is there anything that you can share with him going into it? One, two, three, some bullet points or some things to keep in mind?
Yeah.
I
First
mean, I
thing
like
is,
the first one you just said was very interesting. Was their reaction isn't what this is about
Mhm.
necessarily, right?
Yeah, yeah, because everybody has the same duty and struggle of holding resentment and anger in the heart, and it's very connected to parents. So everybody has it. So we can do it for ourselves and free ourselves, but we can't necessarily force another person to do it, including our parents. Maybe
Hmm.
they're not willing to go there, but still something happens profound to them just by this conversation. Because when you go with, because you're going to forgive them in a sense, right? It's like
Yeah.
a person may receive that or not, but you're going saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for resenting you. I realize I've been holding resentment towards you. I want to let it go. I'm sorry for that." So you're going in a very powerful, humble state. How it's received, we don't know, right?
Okay.
But in terms of steps, the first thing is for this person who asked this question as well. Take a few days to first reflect on, what's driving us in life. Reflect on yourself and see how you've hurt others, you've damaged others, because and why does that happen? Because we were probably damaged in some way, or we were hurt in some way. We've gone through something, and then therefore we do it to others. So when you see that you've been controlled in this way, you can also begin to understand that your parents were also controlled in that way. They couldn't help it. And so it starts to awaken a kind of understanding, and a kind of compassion awakens from that understanding. We're all in the same boat. We might be getting by in this life without, too many difficult or hard experiences. Um, but certainly, some people are aggressive and hurt. And some people are they're not aggressive. They're passive. That also causes damage. All of it is causing, so long we're in this state of consciousness. Again, we're all hurting each other in different ways. The soul is not awakened. And so the material consciousness is just creating. So once we realize that this is like the same situation for everybody, then we can start to feel compassion. And then we go with the spirit of wanting to let go of that resentment from our heart, you know, and then we go and begin this conversation. And the conversation can be something like that.
It
Sorry.
no no. It sounds to me like what you're suggesting. If I'm understanding this person's situation correctly, is that w- everything that you're saying is totally relevant. Like there's this burden of resentment that they've been carrying, and this is an opportunity to let it go. At the same time, this person's parents are their current living situation is no longer viable, and the person feels a certain responsibility to help their parents, but they're convinced that if they try to help the parents, they're not going to be able to receive that help, and it's just going to create another conflict. But that maybe, and you said, we don't know what their response is going to be, but maybe if this conversation is held first, it even opens the door to helping them find a better situation right now, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
there's a breakthrough, right? And
Yeah.
and
I mean,
maybe, yeah, maybe through that breakthrough, they're able to say, now let me help you, let me help you, get better situated here. And maybe they don't open up, but then at least you no longer bear that responsibility, in the same way, because you really went the extra mile to try. Whereas if you just
absolutely.
went and tried to help them change their situation and you haven't broken any new ground, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to accept that help.
Yeah, I highly recommend the first thing to do is to take a few days to reflect on all this and how you want to do it. Don't think too much of exactly what you want to say, but you just go humbly and wanting to let go of resentment and then being willing to have the courage to have this conversation. You know, I could tell one short story of a person doing this. And, you know, there was a man passing away in the hospital. And, you know, when you're passing away, regrets come up. And he was sharing one regret that he had no relationship with his son. Um, and he wanted to find his son. So he gave me actually he gave me a phone number of some family members and asked if I could help him find his son. And we were able to do that. And I called his son and I said, you know, I don't know all the details of what's happened in your relationship with your father. I know you don't have a relationship with him. And at the same time, he's dying right now. And basically, his last desire and request is to see you. And the son said, he's the last person I want to see. And, you know, I just talked to him a little bit and said, yeah, you know, who am I to suggest anything, but just think about it a little bit. You know, he's a short time to live. He's made this request. Just do your own reflection for a few days and, you know, let that be. So I called him after a couple of days and he said, well, something similar to the question today. He said, I'm so angry at him. So what's the point? I'm going to come there. He wants to see me. He wants to say whatever he wants to see. But meanwhile, I'm just holding all this anger towards him. I said, well, come and see him and tell him that. Tell him that you're angry at him. And he had the same fear. What if that, you know, he's dying? What if he dies even more upset? Or I said, no, be honest. This is something you're feeling. Express what's on your heart to him, you know? And he said, I'll think about it. So then and it's amazing. A few days later passed. He calls me this time. And he said, you know, I've been thinking about that he was never there for me in my life. But I've realized that I actually also have a daughter and I'm not there in her life. And he was kind of getting to this point of, well, who am I to be so angry at him when I'm doing the same thing? I'm just like my father. And I said, you really should come, you know, express that. It's amazing because it started off with so much anger at his father, but he was reflecting that he's just like his father. And isn't that true? Right? We're upset with our parents for so many things. And in one sense, we have a very similar nature and we do things, maybe the form's a little different, but you know, I'm sure we all realize there's a lot in common there.
Sure.
And we have the power to break away from some of that and to make a reconciliation. So he came to the hospital. He decided to come and he walked into the room and I brought him into the room to see his father. His father immediately just started crying. And his father, you know, pulled him near and said, you know, I'm so sorry. I've always loved you, you know, all these years. I just didn't know how to come back and talk to you. And I had problems with your mother and I didn't know how to deal with it. And, you know, his son said, you know, I've made the same mistakes and, you know, and his son said, I'm sorry also. And this like shocked his father, you know, because he had done his own kind of self-reflection. He was also apologizing for hating his father. And I think he said that. He said, actually, I've hated you, but I'm sorry for doing that. I couldn't help it. And I realized also you probably tried your best and you couldn't help being who you were. Right. And they both just embraced. I was so impressed with the son because, you know, the father said, I want to forgive my son, bring him here. But the son ended up forgiving the father. They both forgave each other.
Yeah.
And it was like the weight off the heart of the father. You know, he told me later when the son left that I can now truly die in peace. That was the one thing that was there, this incredible guilt for having not being in my son's life. And then imagine the son. Now the son has his whole life to live where this happened with his father, where something very deep and profound took place. That will affect the rest of his relationships for the rest of his life. So I highly recommend, and this is for everybody listening, doesn't have, parent doesn't have to be passing away, but this conversation is so worth it. And it's amazing how afraid we are to have it. When I did this to my mother and my father, I approached both of them and told them I was holding resentment towards them. We have to find out what that is for ourselves personally. And I thought, my mother, how is she going to take this? She's going to, maybe she'll get angry.
Sweetie, your mother.
Yeah.
I've never met such a sweet lady in my life.
Right. Or maybe that's the other thing. We don't want to make a sweet person sad, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to make a sweet person feel guilty or uncomfortable. So there's all these reasons why we don't want to go and have this conversation. But what you're doing is apologizing for holding resentment. It's powerful. And my mother couldn't quite understand the conversation even. She didn't quite get it, but I can see how our relationship changed after. And I had also actually, a lot of us were like fused with our parents in an unhealthy way. And this is powerful because it also breaks us free from them in a healthy way.
Yeah. It seems like maybe it might not be uncommon that the person that's soon to pass away has been wanting to have this conversation their whole life, but unable to really step up and have it.
Yeah.
But maybe they're more ready now than ever. If there's ever a chance, this is the opportunity to break through. Earlier today we were all talking here. I don't know if you even know, Ganesham. We're here with 55 people. Wisdom of the Sages listeners in Villa Vrindavan in Italy. So we're having sanghas mornings and evenings, and we're talking this morning about how this idea that I've been if I'm stepping spiritual vision. Spiritual consciousness means recognizing, first, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind. But it means also recognizing that I've been through so many incarnations. I've been man, I've been woman, I've been black, I've been white, I've been saint, I've been sinner, I've been animal, I've been plant, I've been all of these different things. And when we begin to think that way, it should help us kind of enter into a state of forgiveness. Because it's not just like, well, I'm a good person and this person is a bad person. It's like, no, we've all been good people, we've all been bad people, and we've all been all these mixes of different things. And that this conversation is an opportunity, kind of like a rare opportunity that in one sense this conversation could have been had at any time, but maybe right now there could be a better chance for breakthrough than ever before. So it's like in the timeline of your life, a window is opening right here, but in a window that might change this life for you, this life for the parents, and many lifetimes beyond. That some growth may take place. And I guess your job is so interesting. You get to witness these kind of things all the time.
Yeah, I think we have our sadhana, which is like a daily practice that we enter into, and then there are certain opportunities that are like spiritual dynamite.
Yeah.
It's something, some event takes place or some loss or some opportunity of a conversation like this, where it's like a deep transformation can take place in like a few minutes or in an hour, or where it like changes the rest of our life. And so we have this steady practice that we do. And that's why I highly recommend that people approach their parents and have this conversation, because it can be one of those experiences that are really transforming and stay with you.
So uncomfortable. Takes a lot of courage. But I guess that's what we're called upon to do. Thank you for sharing that, Ganesham Peru. And thank you for coming on here whenever we ask you to. Thank you for taking part in this new, endeavor that we're kicking off. I think your contributions will be really important in that. And I'm going to ask you for something more because Raghunath's not here. And I've got tough questions coming up, so I want you to stick around. You ready to handle this next one with me?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, and I'm noticing this one is coming from our regular listener, Lisa Tuttle. And Lisa, she responded just to this conversation right now on our chat board. She says, "Oh my God, this is a Krishna miracle." She said, it's a Christian miracle that you're here, Ganesham Prabhu. She says, my elderly father died Monday, and I've been trying to support my mom, and it's been really hard to stay steady. So, Lisa, our thoughts are with you, and our prayers are with you. Let me just preface before we take your question by saying that. And I also want to reach out, these storms were so heavy in the New York area and in other parts of the country that some of our close friends and daily Zoomers, went through a lot. I know that, I see Ariana here. Oh, and there's David with her. I'm not sure what happened, but it seemed like it was pretty rough. I hope you're all doing okay. And others have written in, or I've heard that others have, suffered a lot of damage to their homes and so on. So, again, our prayers are with you, and we hope you're doing well, and let us know if we can help in any way. And now Lisa has a question. And I'll take this, but why don't we also get your insights and thoughts on this, Ganesham Prabhu, okay? You're good to stay a little bit extra?
Yes.
Okay. So she writes that this is a question for me. She says, thank you so much for your regular show and offerings through Patreon. I'm grateful to have an anchor in scriptural teachings and devotion. I'm learning and doing my best to deepen my practice. And for your help to this end, I offer you deep appreciation. Thank you, Lisa. So she says, I have a question for Kaustubha. Here, it starts this way. Why does Krishna have a gender? Additionally, why is Krishna's gender male? From my perspective, it is tiring and frankly unbelievable to have to translate and understand God through the firm hand of male power. Interpretations of the law of Manu subjugate and subordinate women and reinforce male power, and have led to much shocking mistreatment of women and girls. Additionally, I find it confusing that Purusha is always, as far as I've seen, defined as male, with Prakriti as female. Why is the Supreme Being considered male? It is a specific barrier to understanding, as one-sided gender identification seems unbalanced and frankly unbelievable, because it's not whole. It seems to me more likely that whoever told or wrote down the stories were reinforcing a specific power structure for social order, rather than an innate characteristics of God, as we have seen in many other religions. And if that is the case, then it would point to the determination of a human rather than divinity. Okay. So, Lisa, I want to start by saying I appreciate just your feelings here. I appreciate that there, historically, right up to our time, that societies are plagued with abuse. And there's always abuse. Wherever there's a lack of spiritual consciousness, there's abuse from those that hold power to those that hold less power. Right? From those that hold more to those that hold less. If we're in material consciousness, we're operating out of fear. We're operating out of fear that there's lack of the resources that I need to be happy in life. And then that could manifest in cruelty and abuse in so many different ways. And so whether it's male to female or whatever the power structure may be, unless there's a purity in one's consciousness, unless there's a security in one's spiritual consciousness that I don't need anything external to be happy, to be whole. I'm not in competition with others. And actually, it's for my own it's in my own interest to be kind to every living being, to care for every living being. That's spiritual consciousness. When we lack that, abuse is going to take place wherever there's a power structure, wherever one holds more power than the other. And that dynamic certainly plays out between male and female. And due to the effects of that, due to the recognition of that, I totally get where you're coming from. Why does this power dynamic have to play out in my spiritual life, in my theology? Right, and no doubt that these kind of dynamics have played out throughout religion or quote unquote spiritual societies, historically. So I get all that. Now, what I'm going to try to do to answer this question is I'm going to try to zoom out. I'm going to try to step back a little bit. I want to step out of current events. I even want to step out of, in one sense, historical dynamics that play out. I want to try to remove ourselves from that, because there are certain things you said. One thing, and I appreciate how you phrase things. You said, from my perspective, and I appreciate that you said that, because really what we're talking about is perspective. I get it, that from one perspective, everything that you're saying makes perfect sense. And I can totally, it makes perfect sense to me that I don't want this burden. I don't want this imposed on my spiritual practice. And the whole thing seems to me, I don't know if I'm using the right language when I say this, but like it almost reeks of patriarchy and so on. If God has to be male, and men wrote these texts, and so that it's hard to give your whole heart to something if you have that suspicion that I'm just getting cheated again, I'm just getting abused again. And this is something that, again, one of our more professional counselors, they might be able to put into a clear context or clear language. But, from my own amateur understanding of abuse and how it plays out, sometimes it just occurs to me that the act of abuse is tragic enough. What to speak of if the effects of it carry on into the future? Like in other words, if the abuse could have ended at the act of abuse, then at least that would minimize it. But if it steals one's trust, one's ability to trust, one's ability to love, then the effects of it just continue and continue and continue. And in one sense, the abusers, their abuses, we're empowering them to abuse us into the future, for the effects of their abuse to burden us into the future. So I guess what I'm saying is, let's try to consider that if the treatment of men to women, and not all treatment of men to women, but some of the treatment of men to women historically has been abusive, let's do all that we can to address that in our own lives. But let's not let that limit our perspective. Let's not let that shrink down what we can accept as being real or not real, right? Just because what you're presenting is an emotional, and I don't mean to minimize it in any way by saying that, because emotions are real, but what you're presenting is an emotional presentation more than an entirely rational one. And again, I don't want my terminology to interfere with what I'm trying to say, but from a purely rational perspective, the fact that there has been abuse from men to women historically does not therefore conclude that necessarily a presentation of a male God is based on that type of abuse. It's a shame if we say I cannot accept a male God because of this abuse. Okay, I put that out there. Now what I want to do is try to zoom out and deal with your first question, which was an interesting question, and it was, why does Krishna have a gender? And my answer to that, if you didn't write anything else, and that was the whole question, why does Krishna have a gender? I would say that almost any question that we ask about Krishna, the answer is always going to be the same. Why does Krishna have a gender? Why does Krishna take birth as a cowherd boy? Why does Krishna, dress the way he does? The reason is this. Why does Krishna have a gender? For the purpose of the exchange of love. Right? That is the truest answer. In other words, Krishna exists to experience love. And he exists to experience love in all varieties. And one variety of love is male-female love, right? There's a certain beauty in it. There's a certain balance in it. There's a certain you use the word wholeness. There's a certain wholeness in it. There's a certain joy in it that's unique. And by having a gender and relating to the other gender, There's he can taste that love, and he can share that love. That love can be shared with a person of another gender. He also has a different type of love for the people of his gender. It's expressed in a different way. It's a different variety. They relish that, and in this way, he's able to relish all different varieties. So why does Krishna have a gender? It's for the sake of love, ultimately. We come into this world and we screw the whole thing up. We imitate it. We try to take his position, and in all kinds of scenarios of abuse take place. And that gets to the next question. Additionally, why is Krishna's gender male? Right? What my vision of the type of concerns that you're bringing up here is what's playing out is we're all imitating Krishna in one way or another. We're all trying to be Bhagavan. We're all trying to be the most powerful, the most beautiful, the most famous. That's what we're doing here in this material world. And this what we call toxic masculinity is someone trying to imitate Krishna and having really no idea what they're doing, being really clumsy at it, being really operating out of fear. Krishna has no fear when he expresses his maleness. Right? He's operating purely from a place of security and purely from a place of love, and that toxic element is not there. We imitate it, and we bring in the toxicity into it. And so now, this is the point that I want to make, is maybe, I don't know, the most important point, or at least the next the next point. And that is that, let me see if I can remember it. Oh God, it was right on my. Maybe I'll turn to Ganesham right now, and I'll remember this point, and it'll come to me in a second. Would you like to share anything, Ganesham, right now?
I could say, Krishna, when we come to the level of Krishna, he's an inconceivable being. It's not like he's just a man, like a man in this world or something. When you come to the level of Krishna, first of all, in the Gita, he says, I am the mother and father of all living beings. So even in that statement, he somehow identifies with both. So that's interesting, right? And so then he has this particular form, but it's an inconceivable being. In one sense, we say he's the masculine energy, that energy of male, Purusha, as was mentioned. But at the same time, what does he love to do? He loves to take the other role and to serve, and not just be served. Like Purusha, sometimes it's defined as the enjoyer, right? And then everything else that exists is Prakriti. Everything else that exists is feminine. So he's the only principle of Purusha, the enjoyer, and everything else is enjoyed. And it's kind of like, as Kaustubha was saying, for the purpose, because that means relationship. Like the masculine and feminine energies are complementary. They're it's like, that Chinese symbol in Taoism, they have the yin and yang. This also shows the reality of the masculine and feminine principles. You have one half that's black, but it has a white nucleus, and the other half is white and it has a black nucleus. So the masculine and feminine energies, they also have the other within them in a certain sense. They're complementary. They fit together as a whole. That's what makes up the whole. The masculine and feminine together is the whole. Krishna sometimes identifies with that whole, and sometimes he's in the role of the enjoyer, and sometimes he's the enjoyed. So when you come to his level, it all kind of mixes. He's not just like a man of this world or something. He's like everything. He's inconceivable. And sometimes he switches his role. And in the Gita as well, he identifies with both. I'm the father and mother of all living beings. So he's everything. So it's not that he's just this one thing. He enjoys going in the other direction as well. And it's almost like, what is this person, Krishna? He's everything.
Yeah, thank you. And that helped me actually remember what I wanted to say too. But thank you for sharing. And where I wanted to go with this was, let's for our own, in our own interest, let's be careful that we don't limit what we don't approach this in a very superficial way. Like, for instance, sometimes someone will bring up a question like, well, if evil exists in the world, then there could be no God. Boom. That's it. Well, now hold it. Stop for a second. There's so much to discuss. There's so many possibilities. If just on the surface level we stop right there, then it's not a very mature conversation. We haven't researched it, and we haven't gone deep into discussion on a topic that is has all kind of nuances to it, and is a very deep conversation that requires or deserves a far more open, sober investigation. And I think that same idea applies here, where, again, I totally can appreciate the feelings that you may have around misogyny, let's say, and the feeling of that being imposed upon a spiritual path that you develop interest in. So that I totally appreciate it. But this is such a deep issue, such a deep topic, that it really requires, I guess what I'm asking of you is, fine, what you're saying is valid, but be open to a very deep and nuanced investigation into this. And I think if you do, you'll find that particularly this path, particularly the path of Gaudiya Vaishnava, if there ever was a spiritual path that was in touch with its feminine side, it's this path. It's Krishna, male. But as Ganesh, I'm saying, but all female energy is coming from it. And it's manifested first and foremost in the form of Radha, who's worshipped in this lineage as superior to Krishna, because what we're interested in is devotion, and she possesses devotion that controls Krishna. And then Krishna feels, she's actually superior to me. I want to try to understand what she's experiencing. And he takes the form of Sri Chaitanya to understand her emotions, and he dances in the street singing love songs that sound like a teenage girl's pining for her boyfriend, and no one can understand what he's going through, because he's all about understanding that feminine attraction to the male figure of God. God himself wants to understand that because he sees it superior to his own position. Great. There's a term, Purusha Abhiman. So Purusha Abhiman literally means like Purusha meaning male, and Abhiman meaning like mentality, or you could say male ego. And like a figure like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who's one of the most important figures in our lineage, who was a man that was like politically powerful. He was like a high court judge. He was a father of, I think, 12 children. Very influential male figure in society. But if you read his songs, like he sang, Chodato Purusha Abhiman Kinkari Hoilan Ajikan. He says, gone is the vanity of my male egoism. I let it all go. And he says, oh Krishna, now I am your faithful maidservant. And then he just writes a whole song about how he's going to serve the gopis, and he's going to make flower garlands for them, and all this. Like he was saying that my male ego is not something that serves me. I'll use it in this world as far as it can serve to protect and serve, but it's not who I am. And that's a meditation that bhakti yogis are embracing on this path. I was also thinking of, like, you take Krishna. We're in this incredible art museum here in Vila Vrindavan. There's such fantastic art here. And when you walk in the front door of this museum, one of the first paintings that you see is a painting of the Pandavas. You have Bhima, who's like, if anyone represents, masculinity, it's him. And Arjuna as well. And Yudhishthir. And Yudhishthir is looking completely distraught. And they're standing, and their wife, Draupadi, is standing there with them, and she's crying tears. And Krishna is holding her face in his hands, and tears are pouring down her face. And what this scene is the first time Krishna's seen Draupadi and the Pandavas since they lost the gambling match. Since Draupadi was dragged by her hair. You want a symbol of toxic masculinity. Draupadi's dragged by her hair into a public assembly. Duryodhana says, "You're my property now." She refuses to accept that, and Dushasana tries to tear the clothes off of her. And the Pandavas are Yudhishthir's feeling responsible for allowing this to happen. Bhima and Arjuna it's just been the most heart-wrenching experience. Draupadi, tears are pouring down her face, and Krishna's holding her face in his hands, and he's saying to her, and this is Krishna's male side, like he's saying, those men that did this to you, their blood will soak the battlefield. I promise you this. Like they will pay for what they've done. And he's assuring her. It's like he's taking a stand and assuring her that this behavior will be dealt with in the most serious manner. They will be killed. But then this is the same Krishna who, when his heart is broken, when Radha turns his back on him, he'll dress up in a sari, right? He'll put on women's clothes and he'll go sing songs to her, to try to win her heart back. It's like, so I guess, we could talk all day about this, but just what I'm throwing out there is just something to give a perspective that this is a very deep and nuanced theology. It does deal with, Krishna having, being male, but don't, I'm requesting of you to try to get beyond that superficial level. I get it. That's definitely a bump in the road. It's worthy of your concern. It's worthy of your concern, but it's also worthy of your investigation, deeper investigation. And I think if we investigate these things together, we'll find hopefully very satisfying answers to you. And that's not to minimize the need for us to deal with issues of misogyny right now and how they play out in our societies, and that's important. And even within the Bhakti-yoga society, this is also important. And there are histories of even recent in our Bhakti-yoga societies of these things needing to be addressed. Let's address them and let's raise the issues that we see, and let's do our best. One person to another, I'm asking you, try not to let that limit your perspective and the possibilities of what's opening to you. All right. And Lisa has written to us a few points. I appear to be having some real problem. Can everybody still hear me? I hope.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think we've lost Kaustubha. It's about at time though, so I think we're gonna end the show. I apologize for just like dropping off like this without a proper ending, but thank you all, and we'll see you Tuesday morning. Thank you for coming on, Ganesham. We really appreciate it.
Hello, everyone.